Chesapeake Bay Preservation Authority Board hearing. JP, we're going to do the informal first?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for being here with us today. Hope everyone had a great weekend. A little bit of heat, and hopefully everyone stays safe over the next couple days here as we get this event that comes up the coast. I do want to point out one item of housekeeping for next month's public hearing. September 7th is a holiday, so city offices will be closed. We will be meeting on Thursday, September 10th. If you look in your staff report on page 3, we have that date indicated for you all. Today's agenda is relatively short. I think next month we'll have a few more items to discuss. We have several property owners and applicants that, again, thank you all for your due diligence through May and June and into July to get the backlog of projects going. As a result of that, a lot of our consultants had to then submit those projects. So they've been doing a lot of engineering and site work layout to get those into Development Services Center for review. So everyone is busy, and they say thank you. Today's agenda items. We have one item of administrative business. That's the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Area Board policies and rules of procedures. You all have a copy of that document in front of you. This was originally adopted in November of 1999. This document has been amended 4 times since, the last being August 27th, 2007. We will be reviewing that today. Staff has made some modifications to that document, with items being either struck out that no longer apply or have been modified, and new items in being underlined. I want to thank Tori Rice, our legal counsel, for putting this together for us. This is an item that we will discuss here during the informal session, and we will be voting on it during the formal session. This is not an item of public notice. This is just the board's rules and procedures. As for our agenda items, we have one item of old business, and that is 409 Susan Constant Drive. And then one item of new business, 1257 Hebdon Cove. So with that being said, we will open up into our administrative business here with the policies and rules of procedures for the board's comment. And then after we have that discussion, staff will roll into the 2 agenda items, if that's okay with you all. So having said that, you can see kind of the rules and procedures, or policies and rules of procedures, as I mentioned, was adopted to facilitate the performance of the board's duties and the exercise of powers set forth by the CBPA ordinance. Authority for the adoption and modifications of these policies and procedures is specifically set forth in the Chesapeake Bay ordinance. You can see the articles under that. So Article 1, we have meetings. Staff has made the modification from the 4th Monday to the 1st Monday. Times and locations remain the same. But at this time, I would like to bring up how the first of the month is working with everyone's schedule. I know we had made a modification on our end, on staff's end, staffing-wise. I will tell you right now, after we've made that modification, one of our staff members has moved on. well needed. Smart young man, needed to be in the position that he is currently in order to advance himself. But now it's back to Chuck and myself. So if the first is working for everyone, we can push forward and adopt that date into these policies and rules of procedures. So any comment on that?
I'm guessing that's why you modified Article 3, Section whatever, Article 2, Section 3 on the deadline for application,
Yes.
so that you don't basically have 10 days to review something?
Correct.
Okay.
And we have been doing pretty well with that. You know, I look at it from a time frame. Typically, that gives us 3 to 4 weeks reviewing items.
Is everybody okay with the first, our meeting?
Yes.
We just have to be mindful of the holidays when they pop up.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
my only concern would be as long as staff has enough time to review the applications between the applications and the meeting, and that's not an onerous amount of time for any, constituent that's coming in trying to get an application. I feel like that's working well. I'm good with it.
Yeah, with regards to staff, when we review it, the ordinance does allow us time when we're supposed to hear an item. Once it's received, I believe we have 60 days. So if something does come in for that public hearing and we're reviewing it and we need some time, we essentially can have an additional month before we have to advertise and still be in compliance.
okay, let's leave it as is, Jake.
Okay.
TJ.
So the second article, applications to the board, Article 2. You will see that on page 4. We have made modifications with the Section 3 and the date. And I believe, Mr. Wallace, you had some verbiage comment regarding Section 3 of Article 2.
Yes, I do. To read it a little bit more appropriately, applications for a variance, this is the underlined section. Applications for a variance request, I would recommend under the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Area Ordinance. That would read better.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other comments on Article 2?
Let me ask this a question. So the last sentence of that says staff will review applications for completeness and contact the applicant if revisions are needed. I feel like there may need to be a deadline for under which you contact the applicant to let them know whether they have a complete application. How is that dealt with? So you said that you've got 60 days to review it once they make the application. So is this inferring that anytime within that 60 days you're going to respond, or can you help me with that mechanics?
Yeah, so typically, and this has been sort of an online function now, given our current situation, applications, when they would come in, say if we received them on a Friday, staff typically met weekly on Tuesdays to review our preliminary project requests. At that time, both CBPA staff and Wetlands Board staff would, once items were brought in, we would go through them as a group. We'd look at the disclosure statements, we'd look at just the completeness of it, what we had, and then inform the applicant if it was complete, like, hey, we're moving forward, or if we had a question on something. We typically reach out to them that first week. Then typically Mr. Payne and I are out in the field the following week to look at the items to make sure that we're kind of matching up, and then go into writing. So it's usually in that first week. We'll let them know if there's, if it's complete, and then the second week, if there's any questions that we have out in the field.
So I'd recommend considering putting in there that what the time frame is that you'll provide your review of the application.
Okay.
If that's 10 days to allow you to have maybe 2 weeks of cycle, if, depending on how things are going in the office, that would give some certainty to when it was that once you submit an application, you're going to hear back from staff on whether or not the application is complete.
I just think you gotta give the applicant a week or so, a week to at least make his revision.
Yeah, I think that's what, I mean,
Well, it's kind of what I'm getting at, but
Right.
just generally speaking, when I, deal with, applications and such across the country, we, it's, maybe I should say it's appreciated by the consulting community when you can tell your client, if I make the submittal by the, by X date, then X number of days after that, I'm going to be given information as to whether or not we're moving forward or not.
Right.
And, that can be a simple, it's complete or it's not. I understand there's more field visits and such that has to happen. So, I guess I'd leave it up to your discretion because you manage it as far as, is that 10 days or,
So right after the word applicant, contact the applicant at least 10 days prior to the hearing?
Well, I was going to suggest that for completeness and contact the applicant within 10 days of receipt, if revisions are needed.
okay.
Yeah.
And typically, I'm not too familiar on the front-facing aspect of our Acela. I know enough to get me into a bit of trouble. But as we review these internally and we advance the workflow, usually the consultant who submits them can see where they are in the workflow. So it gets us down, and at the beginning it does talk about application accepted, and it goes down into the next.
Yeah. Well, and that's the reporting outside of it. I think what
Yeah.
I'm getting to is if I'm sitting down with a prospective applicant, I want to explain to them what's going to happen. It sounds a little nebulous if you just say, we'll let you know if it's good.
Yes. Yeah.
I think when you can sit down with somebody and say, this is your deadline, this is when your next thing's going to happen, and there's some prescriptive times on that, it's a lot easier for people to wrap their head around what's going on.
Absolutely.
Would you be okay adding some sort of language as well, though, that if there's some sort of extenuating circumstance, I mean, we've had extenuating circumstances that the planning department's gone through before that I don't want to see applications getting hung up. Well, in your policies, it says we're going to get feedback in 10 days. I just think there should be some sort of clause. I mean, if the city's closed for inclement weather, if there's, maybe some sort of conditional language like this is the goal, but if there is some sort of act of
I
God
think that should be
or-
a section 4.
Well, they got it, he's going to say at least 10 days before, so that gives them a lot of flexibility.
Well, unless they get shut down, told they can't come to their
Right.
offices or
I
something.
mean, we've seen
But
in
you're
the
gonna call them
past
10 days
year,
and say,
just
"Hey,
a
we're gonna
lot
be
of
shut
things
down."
go
Yeah.
awry, so
Yeah.
I'd be.
Yeah.
You're still going to call them.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
I agree. I think,
Planning's off or the courthouse is closed.
Well, that would apply to any dates in this thing.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
with,
I'm with Dave, you got to give a little time frame for your, so that the applicant knows that he's got a window and that's it,
Are you
Yeah.
saying 10 days from receipt of the application or 10 days from the first?
10 days prior to the hearing,
no,
right?
I think it's 10 days from receipt.
10 days from the receipt of the hearing.
Okay, we'll see you there.
Yeah.
Which I think's great. I mean,
Which
I
gives
wish,
us more time
I
to,
wish when you do an application to DSC, it was like that, not wait the full 30 days and at the last minute you hear about
30
something.
days.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's supposed to be 30 days.
Beware the rabbit
But
hole.
that's what I just, that's what I worry about is,
Right.
I don't want our board to turn into another DSC because it already takes so long to get anything through DSC here in Virginia Beach to do a new construction job, and you can find out at the last minute, that, oh, okay, well, you gotta make all these changes, and then you have to wait through that whole process again. And that's my biggest concern is,
So are you okay with 10 days from receipt?
yes.
Okay, well, good,
Yeah.
let's move
So
on.
if somebody applies early, you're gonna review it early.
No, we pull everything when our deadline is,
Then it's not from receipt, it's from the first.
that's a good point. Because we pull everyone in
Then you could just phrase it
from
by
the,
the
from
10th.
the, yes,
So it's just from the 10th.
within 10 days from the application deadline.
I heard
Good.
somebody say you have 60 days, but isn't it 30? It was the first, and then serve the first Monday of the following. I think Davey said something about that.
I was responding to what he said, so,
It's not 60 days, you don't have 60 days to, from, if the application's on the first, and we're hearing it the following month's first Monday.
No, when the ordinance says that if the city receives an application, we have to act on it within so many days.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay. Something different, that's something.
yeah, something different. That's to keep us from just, eh. Don't know how that translates over the air.
Okay, Article 3.
Article 3, we are looking at policies pertaining to land disturbance activities and specified structures. This was a very unique one. I think the board has advanced and actually does an excellent job at looking at variance applications on a case-by-case basis, based off of merits and underlying environmental conditions. You'll see that we've struck out some items with regards to that. Section 1, Section 4, made modifications to Section 7.
So let me ask you about Section 7. Because I picture an owner with a pair of shears pruning up a tree and there's nothing left but the top branch.
Right.
You
Happen.
gotta have something in there for pruning. They could just go crazy.
Happens. In that case, what we typically do, because we get it all the time, especially now, we have had a lot of people staying at home working on their properties. We defer them to it used to be DCR, now I believe it's under DEQ. But the riparian buffer mitigation and guidance manual. That's where we get our buffer restoration quantities from. Also in there, they talk about woodlot management and proper pruning techniques and what can and can't be removed from the buffer. In there, they do give really good descriptions on proper pruning techniques, and they actually have little diagrams in there as
Do we say the pruning must follow some certain guideline, and then the removal of trees for sight lines or vistas must be approved? But the pruning should say it follows a certain guideline.
Yes, we can add that document, that specific document into these, into that for the pruning aspect of it.
Okay.
Now, can I ask you why you removed section 1 and, section 4? I do understand that, that we've sort of varied from this on occasion, but I like it in there just because it gives us a good, guide about what we should be expecting. I think if we don't have anything, we don't have as much to go on when we feel is out of whack. I don't know, what do you think?
No, oh, go ahead.
I'd rather have something that says generally limited to X number of square feet, because I don't want 4 feet here, 4 feet there, 8 feet.
Yeah, something
It's there.
that's limited.
You might have a guideline that says it's, whatever that adds up to times another 20% or something, and say, that's the general guideline, and then you can come in.
Yeah, I would like to have some type of guideline, because I do think it helps when we have something that comes in that's excessive, you know, that we have, this is generally like what we would like to see. Since this is policy and not law, I think it would be reasonable to have. And then how about 4? Why was that taken out?
Well, with regards to 1 and 4, so staff looked at that. Kind of mulled it back and forth, and we thought, all right, this is something that the board deliberates on a case-by-case basis. We're trying to bring forth to you a sensible plan that just doesn't take into consideration a 4x4x4x8 pad, but takes into consideration everything that we are needing to look at now with regards to encroachment into the RPA feature, retention of existing canopy trees, where our floodplain lies in regards to those improvements, how and where are we looking at those improvements being impacted maybe 20 years from now or 30 years from now with sea level rise. And just from that perspective said, would rather put the onus on the applicant or their consultant to bring forth something that is sensible in regards to all those factors than tell them, we need you to fit into a specific size. And it was really just an act of getting, I would say, the creativeness or the shredding of what you are preparing for a site back into the process.
I kind of agree with staff on this. The 4x4x8 is great if you've got a track-built community that then everybody wants to put a pool in after the fact. It makes sense. But every single one of our lots is different, and a lot of times people are either building a new house and they're doing a whole complete plan. And I think if they're doing a whole, and or they're, you know, weird shaped lots, and you just can't put a rectangular pool with 4x4x8 on it. And we see this, I think, almost every meeting, to where we never stick to it. Because almost everybody integrates their patio or their deck or some other impervious feature into it. I think more of our guideline, 27%, 30%, whatever, which we don't even stick to because, again, it all depends on where you are. If you're in Lynn Haven Colony, we're at 50%. If we're at, in Little Neck, we're at, 23%. It just depends. So I do agree with staff. I think it's up to the applicant to come up with a good plan and for us to review that good plan. And this, I think it pigeonholes it, exactly.
And it only works with rectangular pools.
Exactly.
Well, and to Mr. Chairman, to your comment, that's actually an exercise that staff performs with our applications. We'll look at sort of what the size of that pool is, whether it's 16 by 25, 16 by 30. Do the offset of the 4x4x8. Take that square footage, apply it to what they may have pushed over to one side. I think we've seen 2 or 3 of them recently. There's maybe one off of Bay Colony where they had pretty, I don't want to say egregious, but a pretty aggressive patio with it. And we said, look, in this typical situation, it's usually what we permit.
A small pool takes less square footage, a big pool more. I mean, it's got to be a case by case.
I think we've referred to this numerous times over the past couple of years as a guide to help us reduce certain patio areas that we thought were excessive. And that's my concern, is that if we have nothing then it's not gonna be as easy to say, our norm is about like this, so, and you're way above that norm. So if we no longer have a norm,
Right.
or any reference to a norm, I think it doesn't give us as much, you know, I mean, I don't think we've ever held to this exactly, but but we have used it in discussions in order to reduce the amount of excessive patios.
It could be, you know, we put it back in, and instead of having the 4x4x8, we use verbiage that we see in the ordinance, where it's the minimum necessary to afford relief to provide for use and accessibility.
Yeah.
And then that kind of keeps something in there that we can fall back on and say, listen, we're looking at this from a use and accessibility. You know, in the past, you know, going back to 2007, it was the 4x4x8. We understand that circumstances are changing. However, the modification didn't allow you to just exceed what we typically look at.
I never liked 4x4x8. I mean, who would want to build a pool with 4 feet on the side?
Got one.
Oh, whoever,
Yeah, it's just, but did you like it?
do you have one? If you can push people off. it's
So,
probably easier.
so basically, you're talking about something like this, PJ, impervious pool decking is generally limited to the minimum necessary to afford relief for use and accessibility?
Yes.
Oh, I like that.
That works.
Yes,
That's good.
great.
Yeah, it was just for grins, because I'm the engineer. I was playing around with numbers, and the smaller your pool, the bigger the percentage of the impervious to the pool is.
Yeah.
And the bigger the pool, the more it goes down. So it makes it's a weird
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
metric to even try to work with, like a percent of the pool area or anything like that.
And then if someone doesn't put a deck or a patio in, then, and all they're doing is the pool, which we do see from time to time, then we're limiting them, then they have no use of the pool area, they can't put a table or lounge chairs or any.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah, I like what you said, Casey, that's
think,
good, 'cause
it gives us some
little-
flexibility if they don't have a lot of
Yeah.
decking to let them add an extra patio for use. So, okay. All right.
Very good.
PJ, did you have a comment to June's on section 4?
Yeah, so with regards to that, I was looking just at the verbiage, you know, and it says be stabilized with by the employment of basegate landscape principles. Was kind of thinking on that one with regards to, you know, you have your buffer mitigation for your impervious cover. And I think as time goes on and we look at these projects that introduce fill, you know, I'd rather have that on like again, going back to that case by case, because it might be a situation where I think we saw it 2 hearings ago where we had a very odd shaped peninsula lot. So in a situation like that, and that's not with regards to fill, but just looking at the environmental conditions, we, you know, kind of modified the buffer restoration for that, you know, to be almost like a no-mow zone area. Or in some situations where it might be, you know, influenced by tide or storm, it might be a situation where might actually be a better scenario if it was a turf or a type material that would stabilize the soil as opposed to like a mulch that might get washed out.
So you think we covered the topic well enough with just buffer restoration in general and not have to specifically say what they do in the
Yes.
beginning?
Yeah.
Is it all of section 3?
Yes, sir.
Section 4?
Section 4.
PJ, before you
show-
move on,
Yeah.
is it correct that Article 2 and Article 3 have the same title?
You know what? That's a error on my end.
Okay.
Should be
Good catch.
Article 2, Part 1 and Article 3, Part 2.
Part 2.
I think Article 3 is policies pertaining to land disturbance activities and specified.
Yeah. And last, we go into Article 4, which is our show cause procedures.
So-
Oh, go ahead, sir.
So B, I really don't like that word, significant. That's like an attorney's gonna stand up here for an hour and tell you it's not significant. You get all, I'd just go back to the environmental damage.
Environmental damage, okay.
That's a debatable word.
So you're gonna strike significant or,
Just environmental damage.
okay, just leave environmental.
Mhm.
And on this situation, we pretty much just switched violations to matter of noncompliance, or noncompliance. Any other questions? All
You
right,
wanna talk about these two cases?
thank you all. We will go into the two cases. So, agenda item number 1, it's a case of old business. We've seen this several times. If you're following along in your staff reports, you will see on page 8, under the variance history, the number of times that this variance has come forth. This is for 409 Susan Constant Drive. At the last public hearing, when we heard this, there was some inquiry in regards to the proposed improvements. A little bit of opposition from the Civic League for this neighborhood. The applicant's agent is in the audience here today, will be able to speak to that. It is my understanding that the applicant met with those individuals, has modified the plan to the layout that you see here today with regards to those comments and concerns. So we're looking at this area off of Susan Constant Drive, the aerial. You can see similar properties within the neighborhood. This is a very unique flag lot with a peninsula. The applicant has gone in and rehardened the shoreline with a riprap revetment. There used to be an existing bulkhead there that was dilapidated, had some loss behind it. Instead of re-bulkheading the shoreline, they installed riprap revetment. You can see that on page 8 of the staff report. It's about 595 linear feet of riprap revetment on that shoreline. So when we first saw this case in November of 2019, what the board was looking at was an addition off of the front of the residence, patio off the rear, and a swimming pool. You'll notice that the entire lot's within the 100-foot resource protection area, except for the small portion of the driveway within the flag. At that time, staff got to looking at the application with the engineer of record, and I believe Ms. Barrett McDaniels, a comment that you had made in regards to the residence, and there was a discrepancy in the elevation certificate with the finished floor elevation. With that discrepancy, there was some modifications that were going to need to be performed with the addition to the house. So that took us into the redesign of the property. So on the left-hand side of this slide, you'll see the application that was received on July 6th to construct a new residence on this property. Modifications have been made to the August 3rd, which is on the right-hand side, specifically the location of the detached limited-use accessory dwelling. That has been pulled down and actually connected to the residence via breezeway. Looking at the overlay, so on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see the proposed improvements. Underneath that, and you can also see this within the staff report. If you are following along, this is on page 18 of the staff report. The areas in gray that extend out, that's the existing footprint of the residence. And then underneath the yellow hatching, you will see a dotted blue line following along in this area right here, kind of where that existing residence sits, comes down, comes over this way, comes up. You have the front porch, and then you have a good portion of that driveway underlying. So there's a high element of redevelopment that is associated with this redevelopment of the property. In addition to the high element of redevelopment, applicants also coming forward with a home that's a little bit more sustainable, or is more sustainable with regards to finished floor elevations, concerned with any future storm events or surges, tidal surges that may occur. Going along, also provided in the staff report on page 19, staff had a little bit of concern with, hey, how are you going to buffer this with the amount of new development that is proposed. This is a conceptual layout that was submitted to us, just kind of documenting where some of this buffer restoration could occur, and some of the quantities on the plant list with regards to reintroducing that riparian buffer, specifically in the 50-foot seaward buffer. With this revised layout, the June 6th plan submitted had about 3 canopy trees that were being removed. Now we are down to 0 with this layout. Staff's comfortable with that because there were a few trees that had to be removed with the rehardening of the shoreline. So we want to make sure that the resource that is out there is being preserved, and then we're supplementing that appropriately. A lot of the species on the plant list are conducive to being inundated for short periods of time. So there's an element of longevity with those plants. And then looking at the site aerial, or site photographs, I'm sorry. You'll see this is looking down the shoreline. So right now, our backs will be to the river, and we'll do a panoramic across the existing driveway that's going to be redeveloped. The existing parking court right now is pretty much in the same location with what is proposed. And as you transition along, that's the existing home overlay, pretty much with the proposed residence on top. And then looking down the side property, transitioning to the rear. So this is actually off of the existing pier and float, which on page 18 of the staff report with the proposed improvements, you can kind of see where that location is in regards to the proposed improvements. So we'll be transitioning along and then up the side of the property here. Looking back along the side and then transitioning out. And with that, are there any questions in regards to agenda item number 1?
So, PJ, your write-up says 29.9, and their write-up says 26.8.
Yes, that was a modification that was made in regards to, ours is correct with the revised layout from from August 3rd. And also, we're looking at the impervious cover overall as opposed to just that which is in the RPA feature.
Okay. So your 29.9 is
Correct.
correct. I was just curious on the riprap. You know why they chose riprap over, because was that previous board guideline and they went that route?
Longevity and maintenance. It's my understanding that this property is sort of, we're going to be here for our lifetime. So if the life expectancy of a bulkhead is 25 years, we really don't want to deal with the shoreline again.
Okay. 'Cause that took away a lot of land.
Yes.
I have two questions. PJ, if you could go to the, yeah, right there,
Yes.
and go back one. It looks like this gets overtopped on a regular basis. So are they going to place fill in anticipation of sea level rise? Because that looks like it's already got disticulus or something like that responding to the overwash.
That's, excuse me, that's the stabilization that you see with the shoreline being redone. This area does receive inundation from tidal events, tidal surges,
Yeah.
not on a daily basis. We're looking more at events, maybe something typical that we'll see within the next couple days. With regards to fill on the property, it is my understanding that they do not intend to fill the property. And the reason that this project has gone through the duration that it has is to put improvements on this property that are sustainable to any events that would protect the structure, i.e. you're going to look at a finished floor elevation, and I'm guessing from what the elevation is now and what it's going to go to, but probably in the upwards of 3 feet higher than what it is right now.
And what was did you discuss with him the changing of the gravel to concrete driveway? The necessity for that?
Part of that desire is, again, maintenance, something that's less maintenance intensive. And also part of that is young family desire. Area for kids to be able to roll around, have fun. You'll notice though, Mr. McCoy, in that, so you have a little bit of pea gravel kind of driveway. It does have some fines in it. It's relatively hard pack. Subsurface with just a little bit of roll on that top. Staff has provided a condition though with regards to a portion of that driveway. And in the staff report, that would be on, I believe it is page 12. You will see condition 15. We're looking at that portion of the driveway, and my battery's getting ready to go here. That portion of the driveway, if you're looking at the plan, with that proposed paper path that comes out, that being pervious. The use for that is that portion of the garage is going to be used for storage, pulling in and out items. But that section closest to that easternmost cove where you see the existing pier and boat lift being constructed of a permeable paver. When you step out to the aerial, it's got a little bit of a draw that works through the neighborhood and through the property. So the intent is, as that water wants to naturally sheet flow down towards that cove, we might actually allow for some infiltration to occur.
Are they gonna use the gravel surface as their subsurface and just put the concrete on top of it, or are they gonna actually excavate it? Or do they have a requirement to do either?
I cannot speak to that. I think what's going to dictate that is some subsurface exploration to see if the compaction rate is actually there. That's a great
It
point,
doesn't,
Tim.
it's not a holdback for me, I was just interested.
Yeah. Any other questions in regards to agenda item number 1?
I had this one considered for consent.
I don't think we can if there was public input against the project.
That's true.
I mean,
Then we can give Give you an opportunity to defer it again.
Oh, was there opposition?
I don't think there's,
Well,
op-
what-
I don't
is
think
there,
there's
is there any opposition this month? that we-
As mentioned, I have not received anything. Don't believe we have anyone online with regards to that. I know the architect, Mr. Battaglia, is attending this meeting virtually. Mr. Garrington is in the audience, and they have met with regards to that, but staff has not received any emails for today's event regarding this revised layout.
You mentioned that there was a meeting that occurred with.
There was a
the
meeting that
community.
occurred.
What was the nature of the meeting?
So the nature of the meeting was regards to the deed for this deed for property in this neighborhood with regards to that limited use accessory structure that was on that July 6th public hearing,
Has no
or
hearing on.
exhibit.
Okay.
Seems like from the water quality standpoint, they've done a lot. What staff asked for, plus more. They included the trees that were taken down with the riprap, added BMPs.
It's
And
a better plan.
If there's opposition at the last meeting and that opposition hasn't been withdrawn, we still all here. Or do we say that by default, if they don't oppose us?
Well, we have,
Second time, it doesn't exist.
well, we have to ask if there's any opposition before the consent agenda goes
Right.
through.
I mean,
No one-
even when people send in like letters and stuff, I mean, unless they're here to speak, I don't think that it's an issue.
Okay.
If they're here, you have to give them the opportunity to speak, but as long as you've considered what they're saying.
is everybody saying that if there's not opposition, you're considering it for consent?
Better plan.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It's way better.
You can tell a lot of work went into the planning of this, and so they continuously make improvements, so I think it's a good plan.
Okay. All right, case number 2.
Okay. Let's see here. Oh, not touchscreen. Agenda item number 2, 1257 Hebdon Cove. The variance request you have in front of you today is pretty much to redevelop the rear portion of the property, the accessory structures that exist. There will be a removal of an existing wood decks, 2 in total, construction of a pavilion with associated pavers, retaining wall with associated backfill, and then the existing concrete pool deck will have a porcelain tile overlay on top of it. So looking at the site aerials, you'll see this portion of Hebdon Cove, pretty decent riparian buffer that works down through there. A lot of these properties, front yard, rear yard, good portion of naturalized area. You have a somewhat contiguous green spine that runs down along the existing shoreline for that riparian buffer. Unique to this lot in the northern corner, and you'll see it in the aerial right there, we have a low tidal marsh that works its way up into the property. With that tidal marsh kind of working its way up into the property, staff took the opportunity to provide the condition for the buffer restoration, condition number 3 on page 28, that the low-lying areas of the portion be restored with buffer restoration. That restoration specifically should focus below the 5-foot contour and be conducive to that sort of transition marsh into high marsh into woody shrub. In looking at a property like this in a variance request, staff's of the opinion that given the nature and natural condition of the shoreline and sea level rise, that this actually allows for marsh migration to occur. And that was one of the things we looked at with the shoreline, and specific to if you're looking at the existing condition exhibit on page 31. You can see how that contouring along the western property line, or that long portion of the property line on this property kind of has grades that are conducive to allow that migration to occur. And you'll see that also in the staff write-up on page 27. One thing that staff would like to point out, and a modification will be needed for this, and we reached out to the applicant's agent last week with regards to it. It does appear that the land disturbance associated with this request will exceed 2,500 square feet. So in that case, it'll be required to have a site plan submitted to the Development Services Center for review. So the modification will be needed to the recommended conditions, specifically condition number 1, that just states that, unless the project is phased to where that land disturbance does not exceed 2,500 square feet. But looking at the existing conditions to the proposed improvements, on the right-hand side, you'll see the existing pool. Like I said, that's being resurfaced. You'll see a large highlighted area to the left, right in this area right here. Staff also highlighted the area of fill. So for clarification, that's not proposed pavers. That is just the lawn area where the proposed fill will occur. And then when you look at the comparison of the two, so on the left-hand side with this one, you'll see this large yellow area. That is that proposed lawn area. When you actually take that out of the diagram or the impervious cover scenario, you get what you see on the right-hand side, with majority of the activity occurring around the pool being redevelopment, and then this, battery's going dead, so it wants to jump a little bit. So this pavilion, which will have the pavers underneath, and then the existing deck off the rear, which will be removed and reconstructed.
DJ, did I read correctly that the net impact is only 71 square feet?
That is what was provided to us by the applicant's agent, yes.
Pretty much that little kitchen area, right?
You have some existing wood decks that are being pulled out and brought back. The main component with this variance application is the retaining wall and the associated fill. So when you're looking at the proposed improvements, this is that area of the yard that I was speaking to in regards to mitigation for that kind of transitional tidal edge. You'll see stakes up in the background sort of representing where those limits of disturbance will occur. This is the area where that connection with that retaining wall will occur. Comes across this way, and that's the pavilion area. This portion of the lot to remain, that's the northernmost end of the swimming pool. That retaining wall will stay intact, and this proposal connects in further landward. Oh, that's going backwards. Transitioning down. So that's the edge condition that we have right now. You can see where you would get inundation down in this area. So it makes a good transition, good filter for the runoff. Standing out on the pier, our property is sort of to the right. So this is looking to the west, looking back up at the property. Swimming pools in the background there. Transitioning over, that's the marsh area the staff was talking about. And then sort of walking up that hillside. You can see a little bit of the transition in grade there. And then looking back to the pier. And then the existing pool area that you will see being redeveloped, same footprint, overlay occurring in the lower area.
So it looks like a pretty good and reasonable plan to me.
I
Construction.
think the only
access.
thing that, and I have no problem with the plan, but in the past, we have denied applications where applicants have asked to put in a retaining wall and build up lawn. So I think we need to be a little careful that this doesn't set a precedent.
But there's already lawn there.
Right.
I mean, I think that's what makes this a little bit different, is they're not kind of reclaiming an area that they're not already using as a lawn to create a new lawn. It's kind of a,
If anything, it's gonna
Same for
slow the
same.
water shedding. It's actually gonna treat the water versus having it all just sheet right down to the marsh. I mean, that's just the way I look at it. It's instead of a steep slope where the water's just gonna sheet down, it's gonna hold the water and let it permeate down and filter it. I understand what you're saying. I don't know.
I looked at 71 square feet
Yeah.
net
Right.
impact and a staff recommendation for
Yeah.
approval.
And I think that the one that I remember the most previously was a significant land grab.
Right.
yeah.
So is this a consideration for consent?
Yes.
Yep.
Hey, before we move on to the formal session, can you clarify for me back on 2? Sorry, I think we talked about this and I just didn't get it straight in my head. Condition number 2 has a limitation of 26.8% of impervious on the lot. And I thought in the summary table on the first page, it's calling out 29.9% of the lot. What's the right? And then Mr. Jesser had asked a question about a percentage somewhere in there too, and I'm sorry I didn't catch this when we were talking about it before, but.
Is the 29% within the CVPA's buffer area?
The 29% is the entire project.
What I asked was, which was the correct number?
So with regards to that, you'll see the 12,531 square feet on page 7 of the staff report, if that's what you're referring to, Mr. France.
Yes.
Yes, so we have 12,531 square feet, or 29.9%. Over the development of the project, you've seen sort of an evolution where items have increased in size. Staff went back to condition 2, which was one of the original submittals, which took that 12,530 square feet down to 11,260. That is consistent with, I can't remember which request it was, but it was one of the earlier renditions of when this was turned from a building addition into a demo single-family new construction.
Okay.
So as it's on the plans revised and everything, they're showing 11,260 feet,
No, they're showing the number that's on the front of page 7,
but you're
which is
telling
12.
them
We're
they
telling
have
them
to reduce it
to
to the-
reduce it, to pull it back.
You want them to reduce it to pull it back?
Yes.
Okay.
Just want to make sure I understood what the difference was there.
Okay, I get
Yeah,
Okay,
So if
so-
it's on the consent, they have to agree to that
correct.
reduction?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but with this one, I think just to err on the side of caution, we bring the applicant's agent up to discuss the,
He's got to agree to the,
yes.
yeah, okay. All right, so we'll take a 5-minute break.
Sounds good.
it. Yeah. Oh, I think we.
Good morning. My name is Dave Jesser, and I am chairman of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Area Board. Before I start the August 3rd, 2020 CBPA public hearing, I turn the meeting over to staff for opening remarks. Staff, the meeting is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for participating in today's public hearing. For those of you in attendance for today's CBPA board public hearing virtually, my name is PJ Scully. I am staff liaison to the CBPA board. Due to the current situation surrounding the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic, today's meeting is available electronically in accordance with Virginia Code 2.2-3708.2, Section A, subsection 3, Virginia Code 15.2-1413, and the city's continuity of government ordinance adopted March 31st, 2020, and Chapter 854 of the 2019 Acts of Assembly as amended. Also, this meeting is being recorded. Staff is requiring everyone attending in the chamber today to please practice social distancing. The board and staff is seated accordingly to provide that space. In addition, everyone here, please maintain a distance of at least 6 feet from others. If you absolutely must be within 6 feet of someone, you must wear a mask covering your mouth and nose. A number of attendees in the audience, or the number of attendees in today's audience, has been limited to allow for appropriate spacing and seating in the council chambers, and those seats have been marked accordingly. For speakers that will approach the podium, staff will sanitize the surface of the podium between speakers, so please allow time for us to do so. In addition, once the speaker in the chamber is complete with their comments for the day, and there are no further questions from the board, those individuals may exit through the side chamber door, which you see to our left, marked exit only. That goes out into the hallway. Staff just cautions that you open the door slowly in case there's someone in the hallway. If you wish to further watch today's public hearing, there are numerous televisions within the building. There's one located down in the main lobby for your convenience. To accommodate those that prefer to speak via electronic means, registration has been provided on the CBPA board's webpage at www.vbgov.com/CBPA. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, today we do not have anyone who will be speaking or that has registered to speak or provide comments for today's public hearing. In addition, all votes and roll call will be taken verbally, and staff will call upon board members alphabetically by last name. At the conclusion of the public hearing, CBPA board chair will move to close the public hearing. Chairman will ask for a motion and a second amongst board members. Mr. Chairman, members of the CBPA board, are there any questions regarding this process for staff? Excellent. Thank you, and now I will turn the meeting over to Chairman Jester for opening remarks.
Thank you. Welcome to the August 3rd public hearing for the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Area Board. If you have a cell phone, please turn them off so as not to disturb the meeting. If you plan on giving testimony before the board today, please stand and raise your right hand. Anyone that's going to speak today. You swear or affirm that the testimony you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yep.
Thank you. The order of business today will be as follows. First is a consideration of requests to withdraw or defer an item. We have none of those. Next is the consent agenda. These are items that the board looks favorably upon and are without opposition. If you wish to speak to an item on the consent agenda, please come forward when the item is called. If there is opposition to an item on the consent agenda, it will be moved to the regular agenda to be heard in its normal order. Consent items will be voted upon as a block and will not be brought up again for further consideration. Next are the regular agenda items. These items will proceed in the following manner. Statements by the applicant or agent and proponents, statement by any opponents, rebuttal by the applicant or agent, and deliberation and disposition of the application. During board deliberation, there will be no further public comment unless a question is asked by the board. The board would remind all participants that the applicant is limited to 10 minutes, and all other comments are limited to 3 minutes each. Staff will be timing presentations, and we would ask that you pay attention to the yellow and red lights on the podium, or we will just verbally let you know your time is up. Lastly, the board will hear show cause and restoration items. We have none of those. Please note that any action of the board today may be appealed to the Virginia Beach Circuit Court within 30 days. I don't anticipate the board taking a lunch break today. Finally, all fees payable to the City of Virginia Beach for an application must be paid for an application to be considered complete. The first item before us today is approval of the minutes from the July board meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
I
Second.
second.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A motion to approve the minutes from the July 6, 2020 CBPA Board public hearing has been made by Mr. McCoy, a second by June. I believe you were in first. The vote is open, and staff will call upon each board member individually. If you are in favor of the motion, please say yes. If you are opposed, please say no. Ms. Barrett McDaniels,
Yes.
Mr. Dreps,
Yes.
Mr. France, you were absent.
Abstain.
Mr. Jester,
Yes.
Mr. Jones, you were absent
Abstain.
from the meeting as well. Mr. McCoy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith was absent. Mr. Steyer,
Yes.
and Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the vote of, let's see, 6-4, 3 abstaining, motions from the July 6, 2020 CBPA Board virtual public hearing have been approved. This vote will also serve as roll call for those present today. We do have a quorum.
Okay. Next would be typically a request for deferral or withdrawal, but we do not have any of those. Next is the consent agenda. Please read the first item.
409 Susan Constant Drive, Jeremy and Natalie Biggie.
We skipped the policies and procedures.
Oh.
We
Yes.
skipped voting on policies and procedures.
Can we do it at the end?
It's advertised first.
Okay.
Sorry, Billy. Okay,
Give us a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the Bay Board, for the record.
Billy,
Billy,
Billy, hold
We
on
gotta
one
vote
Give
on
us a
second.
minute.
We got to do the administrative
Okay.
stuff.
much as we want to hear you.
Yeah.
Um,
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept the policies and rules of procedures as amended.
Second.
Hearing a second, a motion to approve the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Area Board policies and rules of procedures has been made by Mr. McCoy, a second by Mr. Jones. The vote is open. Ms. Barrett McDaniels,
Yes.
Mr. Dreps,
Yes.
Mr. France,
Yes.
Mr. Jester,
Yes,
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. McCoy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Steyer,
Yes.
and Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Thank you all. A vote of 9-4, 0 against. The motion to approve the amended Chesapeake Bay Preservation Area Board policies and rules of procedures on today, July 3rd, 2020, has been approved.
Great.
Or August 3rd, 2020 has been approved.
All right,
Thank you.
we'll go back to the consent agenda. Mr.
Mr. Garrington, agenda item number 1409, Susan Constant Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen of the Bay Board, for the record, Billy Garrington on behalf of the applicant, Mr. and Mrs. Jeremy and Natalie Biggie, property known as 409 Susan Constant Drive. Our disclosure statement has been updated and is current. All of our fees have been paid, Mr. Chairman. The conditions in the staff write-up are agreeable to us, and we thank you for putting this on consent. We thank you also for your patience in this case, because as you see in the history, this has been here numerous times, and we have used up a significant amount of PJ's time, and we thank all of y'all for being willing to participate with us, because I think what the result is we have brought together a much better project than what we started out with in the very beginning, and I think it shows in the fact that it's recommended for consent. So we thank you for your time and for all your help.
Great, thanks, Billy.
Second agenda item is 1257.
Do you want to call opposition?
Oh,
That was it. Yes. Is there opposition to this application? You just have to tell us if there is opposition. No? No, okay,
They're standing up for the next case.
okay. So, all right, no.
agenda item number 1257, Hebdon Cove, Ryan and Corinne Angold. We're gonna have to swear them into it.
Or were they not?
No.
Okay. So there's been nothing finished.
There we go.
Okay, do you guys swear or affirm that the testimony you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
We do.
Thank you. You know how the consent agenda works?
No, we just heard it, so.
So basically, if you agree to all the terms that the staff has provided in the write-up, then we will approve this without any further speakers, since there appears to be nobody else in the audience that could stand up and oppose.
Sounds
So are you good with all the conditions?
we are. Yes,
Yeah.
And are
And-
your disclosures up to date and have your fees been paid?
everything's up to date. Everything's all set. Signed,
I
sealed,
forgot to ask you to
consent.
identify yourself.
Excuse me?
Identify yourself.
David Chewy, landscape architect, agent for Ryan and Corinne Angold.
Okay,
I'm Ryan Engel.
okay. All right, thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any opposition? All right, we're ready to vote.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, having heard a second, a motion to approve the following applications. Jeremy and Natalie Biggie at 409 Susan Constant Drive, and Ryan and Corinne Engold at 1257 Hebdon Cove on the consent agenda was made by Mr. Jones and a second by Mr. McCoy. The vote is open. Ms. Barrett McDaniels,
Yes.
Mr. Dreps,
Yes.
Mr. France,
Yes.
Mr. Jester,
Yes,
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. McCoy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Steyer,
Yes.
and Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
By a vote of 9-4, 0 against, the motion to approve the CBPA variance request for the items of 409 Susan Constant Drive and 1257 Hebdon Cove on the consent agenda has been approved.
thank you. That concludes all our business for today, so this meeting is adjourned.